Jean Starkweather is a guardian angel of our planet. She works and she fights to preserve our environment, and she works and fights hard. For these reasons, Jean Starkweather has been named a 1989 Marin Women's Hall of Fame honoree. I'm Sandra Foster, and I'm going to be talking to Jean about her life, her goals and fears, her ups and downs, and the things that have shaped her into the powerful, influential person she is. Hello, Jean.
Hello, Sandra.
And congratulations on your award.
Thank you.
You've spent much of your life fighting for the environment. Have you always spent a lot of time outdoors?
Always. I think I grew up outdoors. My parents both liked to walk or to hike, and they liked to garden, and so did I, and I still do. I have thought for a long time that people have really got to work to keep the best of Marin still here, the best natural features still as part of this county. And to preserve those features, you have to be available. You have to be available when they're threatened.
And we're glad you are.
Thank you.
What is the most dramatic natural scenery that you've ever seen?
Oh, probably Yosemite.
Yosemite Park, yes. And what are some of the natural features here in Marin that you are particularly working to save?
Well, I have particularly worked on wetlands, shoreline, creeks, ponds. I've done some work in preserving divider ridges between cities, backdrops to communities that are really important. The Marin County Open Space District was formed in 1972, as you probably know, with the main purpose to preserve those divider ridges that we all care about, the green belt behind and between our towns and Marin. I have worked on a number of ridgeline projects. In fact, the first one I ever worked on was one that was near my house. A hillside was threatened, and it was a favorite place for my sons to go up and explore when they were young. And one of my sons found a burrowing owl on that hill. Oh. And he came home and he said, there was this little bird, and he described it. It was about this high, and it had these long bare legs. It was like an owl standing on stilts, is the way he first described it. And so we looked in the bird book, and we discovered it was a burrowing owl, and then eventually the whole family found it. And he said, when development plans were announced for that hill, who's going to protect the little owl? Oh. And I'd never been involved in any kind of conservation project before that point. And all I could say is, I don't know, but we'll see what we can do.
Oh, how old was your son at that time?
I don't know. He was probably in junior high. When my children were young, I wasn't involved with conservation projects because I was involved in what they were doing. I worked at Pixie Playground in Ross when I had preschoolers, helped build some of that playground, and used to take the whole neighborhood down there once a week. What? And I did various things around children, Cub Scouts and whatnot, and it wasn't until they got to the age where they were interested in the broader community themselves that I began to work on those other issues.
What would you say was your biggest victory for the environment, or something that you helped bring about for the environment?
Well, one thing that was very satisfying was a pond project along the San Rafael shoreline. Mm-hmm. There's a whole series of lagoons and ponds and wetlands just inside the levee between the San Rafael Canal and the Rod and Gun Club. It's about a 2-mile stretch. And I met this area in 1973 when I was on a very large committee that was advisory to San Rafael for its general plan. And I was on the open space section of that committee. Mm-hmm. And as part of that open space section, we looked at every part of San Rafael and rated various areas that we wanted to work on or thought should be preserved as part of the general plan. And there were these wonderful ponds that nobody was paying any attention to all along that shoreline. And this, I could speak quite a while about those ponds, but you asked about a project. For many years, what we as conservation groups tried to do was simply to keep the ponds from being filled in. Mm-hmm. A particular series of ponds just south of the dump of San Quentin landfill were owned by multiple ownerships. There were 3 ponds, but there were 4 or 5 or 6 ownerships, because the ownerships went through the middle or an edge of the pond. And we had for several years been protesting filling of those ponds, and the property owners had been prevented from overly filling them. They'd pushed in a little here and a little there. And in about 1983, the property owners decided they would get some help from their legislators so that they could fill these ponds and build on them. And I heard about this, and I also went to those legislators, and the result finally was an advisory committee which was set up, which included all the property owners, and I represented 3 conservation groups, and then there were representatives of all the agencies you can think of.
Real cooperative.
BCDC and the Health Department and the Corps of Engineers and Fish and Game and all of them.
Was that
and
successful?
We met, it was chaired by Supervisor Rumier, who was a very fine chairman of a diverse group like that. We met about every month and a half for, a year and a half or 2 years, and beat out a plan where those ponds were preserved, one was enlarged, and a fundraising project was started to raise money. We raised $500,000
Wow.
to enhance the ponds. Property owners agreed to donate the ponds. In fact, they paid each other back and forth because some of the property owners were giving up more of their property because it was
Right.
pond than others were. And they had worked out this formula between each other. And a plan was drawn by the Royston firm in Mill Valley. And this project finally was underway, and it's still not perfect.
Well,
2 of the ponds became tidal. The junk was hauled away from the edges, and instead of straight sides, they're now 4-to-1 slopes so that there is some shoreline edge for shorebirds. But even in their old degraded state, they had more bird use 5 years ago than they have yet as enhanced, newly planted, nice-looking ponds.
Really?
It takes a long time for a rehabilitation project in a wetland to really become good wildlife habitat.
well, the ecology has to sort of grow back for the birds?
That's right. That's right, yeah.
Now, Jean, not everything you and your groups have done can have been popular over the years. And I wonder what the biggest controversy that you've ever been embroiled in.
Well, one of the controversies is over a property on that same shoreline called Canalways. It originally was called Lagoon Park by the city, and then it was called Lands of Holiday Magic, who owned it. And most recently it's been called Canalways because that's what its present owner calls it. It's about an 85-acre wetland. And I think over the years, probably over the last dozen years, there have been 3 or 4 various environmental statements and dozens and dozens of meetings on that property. And it's been controversy since we began. We've tried to get other agencies to buy it because it's a wonderful, wonderful wetland where wading birds such as herons and egrets feed in the nesting season. It's near the island where they nest, and where it's full of migrant birds in the wintertime when it floods. But so far, we haven't made it.
You have said that you're not anti-building, but that you just want to see it done right, and that you believe natural features should be built around rather than destroyed. Can you give us some good and bad examples of that here in Marin?
Oh, there are lots of examples. There's a little pond out in Smith Ranch Road on the way to McGinnis Park, and that little pond was seen as a hole by some former owners. In fact, the former ranch owners. And a neighboring property owner wanted to get rid of a lot of boulders that they had dug out for their project, and we saw this item on the Planning Commission agenda that said to fill a hole on Smith Ranch Road. And I said to my husband, I think that hole is our Smith Ranch Road pond, which indeed it was. And we saved it from that particular fate. We had to save it another time when the road that went by it was redone, and instead of a little ranch road, one-lane ranch road, went to a 4-lane paved road, and they put a big culvert under the road. The next thing we knew, the property owner was pumping the pond out into this big culvert. And once again, we had to ride to the rescue, so to speak.
Right.
And that pond now is Centerville's open space. the land around it will be developed. And so the main push now is to make sure that the land is developed around it right. So it recognizes the pond as a natural feature where there are wild birds and animals, and so that they don't put lawns right up to it and have people running around it, and so that the intrusion by people is only on one side, so that the rest of it can remain as wildlife habitat.
What do you think is the biggest danger to the environment today, the biggest threat?
I think it's probably too many people.
Too many people.
Too many people trying to get into one place.
What is the best thing that the average citizen could do today to help improve the environment?
Well, I think being aware of where you live and what's important to you about where you live. My own particular focus has been on local environmental problems.
Mm-hmm.
There are those who can think in worldwide terms. They can work on rainforests and they can work on acid rain somewhere else. Of course,
Yes.
we have probably problems with acid rain locally too, but there are people who can take the broader view of the worldwide view.
Right.
And I'm happy to support those people, but it's not my particular ability. I do better in something that I know specifically about, that I can walk on, look at, know what features are important. And I think a lot of people are that way. If a hillside near them is important to them, they should find out if it's open space, or if it should be open space, or if there's some feature that's near them that ought to be either preserved, not be built on, or enhanced.
I know that you have learned a great deal about the environment scientifically and technically in order to spot the problems and talk about them. And what have been your best sources for learning more about these problems?
Well, I'm a naturalist by training.
Oh, yes.
Not a biologist, not a scientist, but a naturalist who knows a little about a lot of things. I've taken a number of training courses over the years, which are built on classes I'd had at an earlier age. And I think the combination of classes, the docent training at Audubon Canyon Ranch, for instance, the Bayshore Studies training at Richardson Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, those help form a framework for other kinds of knowledge to attach to. Three of us who were friends started a school program in our local school in 1969 in outdoor education, in environmental education. And none of us were experts. We were all outdoor people. And we felt that it was time that school children should know something about the community that they lived in. So we went to the teachers with a proposal. We had a little grant, and went to the fifth grade teachers with a proposal to do some outdoor education with their children. And we worked with the teachers as to what we do month by month. We went in once a week to each of the classes, 3 fifth grades and 1 sixth grade that first year, and worked with children in the classroom, and then went outside of the classroom to nearby hillsides and looked at what we'd been talking about.
What has surprised you about the political process as you've gotten into it somewhat?
When I first began, it was a surprise to find that ordinary people could have an effect locally.
And I know that you were awarded Speaker of the Year not too long ago. What is that award, and why did they give it to you?
Well, that was very nice of them. It was a Bay Area-wide group called People Speaking, and they make several awards each year to people who have spoken out amid various difficulties on one kind of subject or another. Mine was for the environmental field.
I know the wetlands are a pet project of yours. Could you briefly tell us what the main problem is and what the importance is of the wetlands?
But wetlands perform a number of functions which are really important. For one thing, they're a nursery for fish. If you have no place, no wetlands, no cord grass, no pickleweed, then the fish eggs have no place to attach to. The fingerling fish have no place to hide. They're extremely important for that. Aside from that, they're very important for the quality of our air and the quality of our water. They filter pollutants out of the water They filter pollutants out of the air. And not only that, they provide a great food source for everything else that does live on the water, from fish on up to large animals.
So they're part of the whole system.
That's right.
It
That's
sounds
right.
like.
If we didn't have wetlands around San Francisco Bay, our climate would be different.
The climate too.
That's right.
Wow. You're also a guide at Audubon Canyon Ranch. Can you tell us briefly something about that ranch?
Well, Audubon Canyon Ranch was founded in the mid-50s. A man noticed that the heronry, which is a nesting place for great blue herons and great egrets, was threatened on that what was called Canyon Ranch at that point property, because it had been sold and a developer was going to build summer houses in the canyon. So the person, whose name was Mari Griffin, tried to buy just the canyon. And the new owners would not sell the canyon because that was the best place to put the houses, but they would sell the whole ranch. So Dr. Griffin talked the Marin Audubon Society, at that point, which only had 125 members, into buying a 350-acre ranch and raising the money to do that. And that was the beginning of Audubon Canyon Ranch.
What has been the biggest reward to you individually, biggest inner reward from your work?
Well, there are a number of, I guess there are a number of kinds of satisfactions. I think one satisfaction that's been a really great satisfaction each year was the 17 years that I ran the school program. At the end of the season, to know that those 130 or 150 fifth graders had learned something more about their community and the natural lands around that community.
And the sharing.
That's right. I guess another kind of satisfaction, though, comes from simply being part of a project where you've acquired open space for all time that will not change. Lands change. Vegetation grows up and changes over time, but to know that you've had a hand in preserving something of importance for your children and for future generations is very satisfying.
What do you think is the most important quality for an environmental worker to have?
Persistence.
Persistence, okay. And how would you advise a person starting out today wanting to be an environmental volunteer like you?
Well, I think the easiest thing to do is to join a group that's working on it. You join Marin Audubon Society, who has an active conservation committee, which I've been a member of since early 70s. Could join the Marin Conservation League, works on local projects. Could join the Safe San Francisco Bay Association, which works on broader issues all around San Francisco Bay. Or join one of the national groups that works on really important national interests, clean air, clean water, whatever, and start writing letters and such.
And Jean, you were born in 1929, I think you said in Seattle,
Right.
Of a librarian mother and a banker father, and you had one younger brother.
Right.
What is your most vivid memory of growing up in Seattle?
Well, I guess as a child, my most satisfying memories are of summer. We spent every summer across Puget Sound at a little place called Indianola. The tide went out a quarter of a mile, and my brother and I and other local kids played on the beach all summer, hiked in those woods. It was very family-oriented, very outdoor-oriented. And
so you've had that all your life?
All my life, that's right. And as far as where we lived, I can remember always doing projects, building little towns out in the garden with little gardens around them. And I was always organizing things and games and projects.
And as you grew up, did you have any particular dream for your future?
Oh, I was going to do wonderful things. All kids think they're going to do wonderful things.
Sure.
And I thought they would probably be involved with group work, with working with kids. Yeah. And in fact, all the way through college, I thought I would be doing group work when I got out of college, but I couldn't get the job doing that.
How did you meet your husband?
I was visiting a mutual friend in New York, and so was he.
And what first sort of drew you to him or attracted you to him?
He was handsome.
He was handsome. Any other good qualities?
You said first.
First.
He has
I
all
did
kinds
say
of good
first.
qualities.
I did say first.
right.
What did you discover later?
That we thought alike about a lot of things, and he was just a very interesting person, and wonderful to talk to, and good company, wonderful sense of humor, and a wonderful laugh.
When and why did you and your husband move to Marin?
Well, when he got out of graduate school with his doctorate, he got a job at University of California, the San Francisco campus, and we lived in the city for, I guess, 9 months. During that time, we found a house in Marin that we could afford, barely. And we loved it. And we loved the area, and we loved the open ridges around it. And I guess, in a few words, we just fell in love with this place and moved here, and we've been here ever since.
That's a good reason. And you have 3 sons
Right.
who are now approximately ages 30 through 34. And what have you tried to instill in them?
Do your best.
Do your best.
That's right. They all have very different interests. They're all outdoor types, but they've all gone very different directions, and you just want them to pick their own direction and go for it.
What do you think the best quality is for a mother to have?
Strength, maybe?
Uh-oh. Jean, how has your family been affected by your very active public life, would you say?
Well, I think I would not have started such a lot of activity if it had not been for my children. They got me into it. You know, the remark about the little owl on the hill, will somebody do something, got me into seeing what could be done. I didn't know what a planning commission was. I didn't know what a city council did. We weren't even in a city. Our area is now in the city, but wasn't then. And you start going to meetings and finding out how other people do things.
Were your children amazed when you started doing these things?
No, they just assumed that, you know, children just assume adults are going to do everything they can, and they know how to do things. And even though you talk to them about what are we going to do next and how are we going to figure this out, and you have a neighborhood meeting and you talk about what you can do, and somebody has one idea and somebody has another, and you kind of all come together. It was seat of your pants kind of activities, but you learn what a planning commission is and what a council is, and that planning departments are professionals who run an actual department and are very helpful, and you learn how things are done.
What project takes most of your time right now?
Environmental projects of various sorts.
Various stripes.
Various sorts.
Do you ever plan to retire?
No, no. Retirement is not anything I know about.
In addition to the environmental work, I know you're also active in your church and you sing in the choir. Do you have a favorite hymn or a favorite piece?
No, I just like to sing.
Just like to go
I
and
like to sing with a group.
Have you mentored others in the environmental work, other women especially?
Well, I guess one aspect of that would be I've served on the training committee the last several docent classes at Audubon Canyon Ranch. We train a new class of docents every other year. It's a class that starts in September and goes through February once a week. And I have really enjoyed being on those training committees. We either do the teaching ourselves or have experts who come in, because it is a way to transmit what's special about that place and what's special about the environment to a whole new group of people.
What is your worst fear for the environment 20 years from now?
I guess the worst fear is that steps aren't taken to preserve our air and our water. They're so very important. Those are issues that I haven't myself worked on. It really, I think, takes a national organization to work on those, and I support some of those a little bit financially, and I wish them well, but I think those are really critical issues.
How would you most like to be remembered?
Oh, goodness, I would guess I would have to say I'd like to be remembered as somebody who, with energy and persistence, worked on projects that needed doing.
Okay. Do you have anything to add? We've discussed many aspects of your life and your projects, but is there something we haven't covered that, that you would like to add and tell us about? either in your life or advice or about the environment?
Well, you had asked earlier what you did as a child, whether it had some aspects to it that had a relationship to what you're doing now. And I really think that whatever you do in your life, whatever projects, whatever hobbies you have, whatever classes you take, whatever jobs you have, end up contributing to what you end up doing. You use everything. You don't know particularly where you get a particular skill, but you've worked on it some other time. And lots of us who sort of gathered skills as they went along and added to them and ended up doing something completely different than we first started out with, can look back and say, well, yeah, but I did this and this and this, and they all came together here. And then I was off in these other directions, but what I really liked was still with me, and I ended up working on it with all the skills I've had. If I look back, there's some other skills I wish I'd had, but you work with what you've got, and you make the most of it.
Jean, you said earlier that you were a naturalist.
Mm-hmm.
Is this, you have a degree in psychology, is this something that's a degree or a certificate or something one
A
becomes?
naturalist, no, it's a very loose term.
Okay.
Biologists who work with ecology in the outdoors often refer themselves as naturalists instead of biologists. Biology, for instance, is the science. Now, ology means study of life. Geology is the study of the earth. And a naturalist is somebody who uses that information in some way. And my particular one came from classes, both in high school and in college, and then adding to it with training classes of various kinds.
If a person were interested in learning more about the environment in more detail, are there publications or is there a particular book or two that you would recommend for someone to read?
Well, I'd suggest they take a class. Take a class at College of Marin, or look into the local conservation groups and see what kind of lectures and talks and series of trips that they give. There's all kinds of things in Marin that you can make the most of.